Greetings, this is MBA 522, and this lecture is on employee empowerment and employee engagement. And while this is a really broad topic, what I'm going to talk about is the context of how empowerment and engagement can impact the kinds of decisions that your employees will make, um, and how important it is to delegate to your employees and to empower them to make better decisions. So we will work through this material all with the eye towards how do we help our employees to make better decisions. Employee empowerment is defined as the process that gives subordinates greater discretion and resources. And so we always talk about empowering others. And really, what we mean by empowering others is empowering our subordinates to do work. Not because we don't want to do it necessarily, although that may be certainly the case, but mostly we're empowering them to do it because we want them to learn the skills so they can grow and develop and work their way up in the company hierarchy. So, empowerment requires a couple of different things. Number one, it requires decentralized control, which means that the control is not at the top of the organization, or it's not centered within you. It's actually centered below you amongst your subordinates. They are the ones that are doing the work. So you're empowering them to take responsibility for that work. And so they have the authority and the responsibility to accomplish things. Now, ultimately, of course, if you're delegating to them, you're empowering them to do the work. You are still ultimately responsible for getting it done. So the better job you do to prepare them, obviously, the better they'll be able to accomplish the work and feel empowered. The decisions are made closer to the customer. And so, of course, we want to empower those who are closest to our customers to be able to make more decisions, better decisions. And for example, Southwest Airlines empowers their employees who work at the gate and in basic customer service, they empower them to make decisions up to a certain dollar amount. So without question, if they feel like the employee feels like this is something that will help make the customer happy, the organization stands behind them and gives them the authority, the autonomy to be able to make that decision on their own without having to get it approved by a higher up. And I think after they hit that certain dollar threshold, the higher up the dollar amount is, then they need to get authority to do it. But the goal of doing that, of course, is so that they can be more agile. They can make quicker decisions. They can support customers in a more effective and efficient way. And if you require them to go through multiple levels of approvals to do things, you're going to find that they're not going to feel so happy. The customers are not going to feel happy, and the employees don't feel empowered to do anything with any sort of authority. So the more that we can give them some degree of autonomy on the job, the more enriched that job is, the more happy and satisfied the employees will be down the line. What are some of the implications for decision making? Well, in order for us to empower our employees to make key decisions, we have to have confidence in them and we have to trust them. That means then that we have to train them well. We have to know that they are clear about the standards that we set for performance and that they're willing and able to meet those standards. If we're not willing and able to set those standards for our employees and they're not willing to meet those standards, then this is not going to be a good empowered relationship. So our goal is we have to trust them, and the only way we can trust them is making sure that we've trained them properly and we have done the checks and balances to make sure that they are doing things the way we want them to do them. We delegate then the authority to them. And so for them to be able to make good decisions, they have to know what the expectations are. They have to know what the work is involved. They have to know all the parameters and all the standards and all of the conditions under which they can make those decisions. And then they are given as much autonomy and authority to make those decisions as possible. And that's our goal, right? We want them to feel empowered and enriched so that they can feel engaged and comfortable with the company and then grow with them down the long run. We can't talk about empowerment unless we talk about delegation, because central to empowering employees is delegating to them things that require more responsibility and autonomy. So as we delegate more, people are more empowered. And when they feel more empowered, they are involved in having enriched jobs, and those enriched jobs really trigger intrinsic motivators, and those intrinsic motivators are the things that keep people engaged and happy with the organization. So we can see that there's a direct relationship between the two. So what we're going to talk about in the next few slides is this idea of delegating, and how delegating to your employees, the different kinds of levels of delegation that you will engage in, has an impact on the types of decisions that they will make and the kind of support you provide for them while they're making those decisions. Successful delegation requires 9 basic steps. Oftentimes these are done simultaneously, but I want to make sure that we're clear that there's 9 different things that we should be thinking about as we are delegating to our employees. Number 1, we need to be able to identify the task, to be able to define it clearly. Number 2, to be able to figure out who are we delegating it to. Is it in an individual or a group of individuals, in a team? We need to be able to assess the ability and training needs of those who are doing the decision. So do they have all the tools that they need to successfully be able to do the task that you're assigning to them, that you are empowering them to do? If they don't have that ability, then you need to make sure that they're trained and that they have the ability to do that. After we have assessed their ability and their training needs, we need to explain the reasons why we are giving the work to them, what it is that we want them to accomplish. And number 5, that goes hand in hand with stating the required results. So when we're delegating to someone, that's great. We don't always just wash our hands of it and say, now that you have been delegated this work, I don't need to follow up with you anymore. We need to make sure that we set the standards for what the expectation is, so that they have some idea of what it is that I expect of them in order to successfully complete the project. We need to then consider the resources that they need to be able to do the job. Not just do they have the ability, right? But more, do they need money? Do they need time? Do they need raw materials? Do they need certain KSAs from team members to be able to accomplish something? So what resources do they need, and making sure that I provide it to them as their boss. I want to make sure that I'm clear about the time boundness of the goals and the expectations. So it's one thing to delegate the authority, but you cannot wash your hands of being clear. Like you would set a SMART goal. And our next slide addresses some of those issues around SMART goals and SMART expectations. But we want to be sure that we agree. I need this done by next Tuesday. I need this done by Sunday. I need this done by, Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So make sure we're clear on when those expectations are in terms of getting the things done. We want to make sure we're providing support, and we communicate to our employees what they need to do, and communicate with them to see if they need some help. Oftentimes people feel like they can't ask for help, and that's not true. Delegating doesn't mean that we wash our hands of a situation as the boss, nor does it mean that as the employee that we cannot ask for the support that we need. We're not asking our boss to do it for us, but if we find ourselves struggling with a wall that we need to climb over, then we need to talk to the boss about the best way to climb over that wall. They advise us, they coach us, and then we push through and we make it work. Lastly, if you are delegating to others, once they've accomplished the project, you want to make sure you're giving them feedback, regular feedback on the results, so that they are aware of what they did, why they did it, and whether or not they're successful. And again, this all ties back into an enriched job. Enriched jobs, people get good feedback. They have a sense of autonomy and responsibility for work. And these are some of the essentials that you need for enriched jobs, so that people feel like they have something that is meaningful to them, that triggers and enhances the intrinsic motivators. So we'll move on to the next slide, and we'll address how do we apply the concept of SMART goals to delegation and empowerment. Whether we're setting goals or whether we're delegating and empowering others, we need to make sure we're setting smart expectations. That means that they have to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And I think we would all agree on that because when we're delegating to others, we are helping them to set an appropriate goal. So these ideas sort of mesh together anyway. But the things that we want to add to smart delegation and smart empowerment is this idea of supporting and communicating and providing regular feedback. And I know that was listed on the previous slide, the importance of making sure that we are supportive and we're communicating and that we're giving people feedback. This helps to enhance the enriched jobs that we're giving employees, then making them more responsible and allowing them to have more autonomy on the job. It is important, as you'll see as we go through the next couple slides where we talk about the levels of delegation, we talk about how important it is to support and communicate people. We can't just dump an assignment on someone and say, I'm delegating, now you go take care of it. We don't know if they're prepared. We don't know if they have the skills. We don't know if they have the resources to be able to do certain things. So it is really important that we take the time to support and communicate what our expectations are, and then to check in with them on a reasonable and regular basis to make sure that they have everything they need. Oftentimes people will feel like they can't ask for feedback or they can't ask for help. And the goal is to make sure that you ask them in advance so they don't feel hindered in being able to ask the question for whatever support that they need. The last item, again, providing regular feedback, making sure we're doing the check-ins and we're giving people the feedback that they need and we're keeping them on track on the project, because again, even though we're delegating, the ultimate responsibility still falls on us to make sure that the job gets done at the standards that are expected. And so if someone's given us the authority to do something, we can delegate that to somebody else and empower them to do the work, but we also need to make sure it's done right. We don't abdicate our responsibility for making sure that it's done to the standards that are expected. For all intents and purposes, there are about 10 levels of delegation. Obviously, it could be more than that, but these are the most agreed upon levels, from no get delegation at all, where pretty much you get told what to do very explicitly, and while you can perform the task as the employee being delegated to, you don't really have a lot of autonomy in the decisions. You simply follow the instructions, you follow the guidelines explicitly, you have no flexibility in what you can do and how you do it. That's the lowest level of delegation. And it works its way up from that lowest level all the way up to the highest level. I remember one time having a student say to me when I was teaching them in a previous program, I don't trust my employees because I always feel like I have to check up on them and make sure they're doing the work exactly the way I want it. I said, so in other words, you're being a micromanager. And he goes, well, yeah, but I don't want to be. And I said, what are you doing to prepare your employees to be able to do the job? Are you training them? Are you working with them hand in hand? Are you setting standards for them? Are you giving them regular feedback? And he was like, well, no. I said, well, that's why you don't trust them, because you aren't preparing them to be delegated to. Delegation isn't something that you just automatically do and it happens and there's no problems. You have to set people up for success through training, through support, through communication, through building trust in your relationship with them. It's all about relationship building, right? So these levels of delegation are something that you can work through little by little over time with your employees. And the goal is you might start with simply telling them what to do, how to do it, where to do it, when to do it. And then you could work up to, this is what I'd like you to do. You tell me what you would like, how you would handle this. And then you start to see if they're thinking through the problem and coming up with good solutions. And so you can see these layers build little by little. The next level up from basic instruction with no delegated freedom is investigation and analysis, where you take responsibility for telling them that they can assess the options. And you can say, here, here's two options. You can do A or you can do B. Which one do you think you should do? And again, you're training them to learn how to make better decisions through delegation. You can work yourself up then next to encourage and enable, where the decision is really a shared process. Look into this. Tell me what you think, and then we'll decide this together. So you give the person some time to analyze, and then they can think of all the different options, and then they will sit down with the boss and they make the decision collaboratively. You can give them freedom for analysis and decision making. Then basically what the boss would say is, tell me the situation and what help you need from me to assess and handle it. Then we will decide together. So in this circumstance, you can see incrementally we're training the employee to analyze the situation in the way that we find acceptable, to start thinking about reasonable options, and then ultimately doing the analysis on their own. And you'll see in the next 2 pages, these levels of responsibility that are given to the employee, that are empowered to them, is growing incrementally step by step.